We'd like to tell you you're about to see a miracle. Police officers should know better than that. Yours isn't an occupation blessed with supernatural happy endings, far from it. But in around 90 minutes, we guarantee some of you will still choose to believe the impossible, even though you know you shouldn't. This miracle involves the murder of many police officers, hundreds of firemen, God only knows how many servicemen, good men and women. But to believe the most obvious conclusion as to who killed them, that may prove too much for many of you. Either way, you're about to become a believer in miracles, a coward, or you could choose to give your kids half a chance. We've all heard about the magic of television. But 14 years ago, this was taken to new extremes. Not just one, but numerous news agencies would report our miracle. And in true prophetic style, they would announce it with great certainty before it had even occurred. If you've never seen this wondrous event before, it's because some people would rather that you didn't know. Especially that people like you didn't know. You see, some news is just so bad, it's not a good idea to spread it around. Some would rather it was just forgotten and thrown away.
Joining us. We are getting information now that one of the other buildings, Building 7 in the World Trade Center complex, is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing. And you, to be honest, can see these pictures a little bit more clearly than I. But building number 7, one of the buildings in this very large...
Again, as you're talking, news is continuing to come in, as you can imagine. We're now being told that yet another enormous building in New York has collapsed. It is the 47-story Salomon Brothers building, which was situated very close to the World Trade Center, right there in this financial capital.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago, I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. I'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse? Presumably there were very few people in the Salomon building when it collapsed. I mean, there were, I suppose, fears of possible further collapses around the area.
That's what you would hope, because this whole downtown area behind me has been completely sealed off and evacuated, apart from the emergency workers. That was done by the mayor, Rudy Giuliani, much earlier.
Reporting the collapse of a building while it's still standing bolt upright in plain view, well, just once is bad enough. To do it at least 4 times might be deemed careless, and that's what we're meant to believe. But World Trade Center Building 7, also known as the Salomon Brothers building, fell at 5:20 p.m. Not an hour before, not half an hour or 20 minutes before, but when it did finally fall. Not struck by any aeroplane, or engulfed by a raging inferno, it hit the ground within 7 seconds. It would take US authorities 7 years to announce it fell due to normal office fires, in a report now proven to be riddled with lies and fraud. We all believed in a fairy tale once.
Radio? Yes, Viper 52 departing zone 208 for zone 4. We call frequency.
I just drove over a body.
Yeah. Viper 52 report free change zone 4.
Maybe there's a visual. I just drove over a body.
We know this worldview, the peddling of lies, that 9/11 was somehow a Jewish plot, or that the 7/7 London attacks were staged. We must be clear, to defeat the ideology of extremism, we need to deal with all forms of extremism, not just violent extremism.
You may wish to find a quiet place to discuss all this. It would appear some are getting a little nervous at the spread of disbelief. And besides, what you're about to see you won't find on your TV at home. And with an event that you instinctively know doesn't look right, you really should study all the available evidence before making any leap of faith.
You hear that?
Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down.
The building is about to blow up. Move it back.
All right, guys?
We are walking back. There's a building about to blow up. Yeah, here's one of the guys who can tell you I'm okay, all right? Here, hold on. You want to call your mother or something?
You gotta get back. I know that. You gotta get back.
All right? Don't worry about it.
You gotta get back.
All right?
I know that. You gotta get back.
All right?
Student. He was down there. He was trying to help people. His name is Daryl.
Yeah, so I was just standing there. You know, we were watching the building actually because it was on fire. The bottom floors of the building were on fire, and you know, we heard this sound that sounded like a clap of thunder. Turned around, we were shocked to see that the building was well, it looked like there was a shock wave ripping through the building.
There was an explosion, and the landing gave way, and I was left there hanging. I had to climb back up, and now I had to walk back up to the 8th floor.
Dus dit is controlled demolition.
Zeker weten?
Zeker weten. Er is nagesprongen. Dit is in opdracht gebeurd. Dit heeft een team gedaan van experts.
Maar dit is ook op 11 september gebeurd.
Dezelfde dag?
Dezelfde dag.
Dezelfde dag? Weet je dat zeker?
Ja.
Was het zeker weten de 11e? Daar waar ze.
Jim, Heidi, just a very short time ago, World Trade Center 7 collapsed here in Lower Manhattan. You'll know that that houses OEM, the Office of Emergency Management. The bunker is in there. It collapsed, and as far as we know, everyone had been evacuated from the building a little earlier. Now, let me tell you, when this building went down, there was mass confusion, chaos down here. I looked around, and all I saw was a wall of police officers running for their lives. And I'm going to call in Bill Rosati. He was here when it all happened. He saw it for himself. Bill, if you can just tell us what you saw, what you heard.
I was standing like 2 blocks away, and all of a sudden I just seen a big flash, and then I seen the building coming down, and I just seen people just running everywhere, chaotic like.
Walking back, there's a building about to blow up. You want to call your mother or something?
I was standing like 2 blocks away, and all of a sudden I just seen a big flash. I seen the building coming down.
When you reached the 8th or the 6th floor, the landing that we were standing on gave way. There was an explosion, and the landing gave way.
Police officers running for their lives.
Dit is controlled demolition.
Larry Silverstein, leaseholder of the World Trade Center complex, including Building 7, fortuitously skipped his usual breakfast in the ill-fated Tower 1 that morning, but he was reported to have taken time to call his insurers that afternoon, asking questions about controlled demolition.
When you look back over this, is there something that needs to be told about this experience that you haven't yet discussed? Is there a series of events or something that you feel like we should know?
Let's get to calls. Kathy's waiting in Kingsport, Tennessee. Democratic caller. Hi, Kathy.
Hi.
Morning.
I wanted to ask, the well-known attorney, Dr. William Pepper, has sent a letter to the Department of Commerce pointing out that the NIST's report on the destruction of Building 7 on 9/11 omitted important features of the building design, which, if included, would have made the fire collapse hypothesis impossible. Hence, understanding why Building 7 really fell is crucially important to better understanding 9/11 and our current situation. Would you be willing to review that letter and assist in getting the DOC to address the issues raised in it?
I'd be happy to review the letter. I have to say I'm not familiar with that correspondence.
Anybody with two functioning brain cells and an internet connection can see that there are huge questions about 9/11, yet you will not have one single mainstream media source look into this blatant smoking gun that 9/11 was an inside job. You continually obfuscate or paint the people that are just trying to get simple answers as, conspiracy theorists. The conspiracy theory lies in our government.
Well, thank you so much, Michael, for your call.
I'm a retired Army senior NCO with over 23 years of service. Congress's refusal to investigate the evidence that Building 7 was brought down in a controlled demolition on 9/11 is based on its blind trust in this WTC-7 report, which has now been found to contain incorrect data about the building design that, when corrected, renders this fire collapse conclusion impossible.
The evidence that the World Trade Center Building 7 was brought down with explosives on 9/11 is real and proven, and more people are waking up to it every day. How much more trust of the American public does Congress have to lose before it faces reality and acknowledges the need for a new investigation into Building 7's destruction?
I don't think it needs any more investigation. I don't think that. I think the way that those towers were brought down were by radical Islamic terrorists, and that's the way it is. And I think every investigation has shown that so far.
Did you read the 9/11 investigation by the committees? But you think it was adequate enough?
Yeah, I think so.
National Institute of Standards and Technology acknowledged that the World Trade Center Building 7 fell at free-fall acceleration for over 100 feet on 9/11, which means it was meeting no resistance for 8 stories. So, sparing me a diatribe about conspiracy theories, can you please give me a straight answer on how you think that's scientifically possible without the use of explosives?
Look, I think we should pass on this question.
This has shocked everybody again. That is 10 reporter Al Jones with the news and giving us that description of World Trade Center Building number 7 going down, a 47-story building. That, too, is gone.
Imagine an Italian police officer who'd never heard the word mafia. Happy days for organized crime. Now imagine the majority of every police force who'd never heard the term false flag. A false flag is a highly covert operation, usually initiated by military or intelligence agencies within a government, to attack its own country and its own citizens, only to blame another country, most usually one you wish to invade or eradicate, but need a good reason to rally public support. Terrorism usually does the trick. And if you think the notion of governments killing their own people for political leverage died out in the games of Rome, you're about to be proved wrong. Because even dead coppers and firemen, those who are often first on the scene of a false flag attack, are nothing but very useful statistics to enrage any public sick of funding expensive wars.
Roger, we have a black SUV or bongo truck picking up the bodies. Request permission to engage.
Matt Campbell's brother Jeff died on 9/11, one of 67 British citizens who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was attending an office meeting in the North Tower of World Trade Center when it was struck by the aircraft. Like anyone who's bothered to study the collapse of Building 7, Matt is unconvinced by the official narrative Mr. Cameron is so keen for us all to adopt. Yes, Matt is a non-violent extremist, and he's come to the US to meet just a few like-minded threats to democracy. Except these happen to be firefighters, soldiers, and police officers.
I wanted to help people, but then again, I wanted to make money too. I was in engineering school in San Diego State, and I was in my third year, and I started looking at, of course I had 2 children at the time, and so I said, well, engineer or a cop. Cop was making more money than engineers at that time, so I became a cop, California Highway Patrols. My first duty assignment was in a pretty bad area called South Los Angeles, and it's a high crime area, and chases and stuff like that. Pretty exciting. I got a lot of awards for being Officer of the Year and for bravery. I got a Medal of Valor for saving someone's life. I woke up to 9/11 around 2005 when I seen Building 7 go. Even though I seen it on 9/11 2001, I seen it go down. It was almost like a ghost, you know. It went down and then it went out of the consciousness. For some odd reason, it seems that police officers do not want to go left or right. They want to stay right down the center. They don't want to make waves. They don't want to cause any attention to themselves because of promotion, because of retirement, pensions. And it upsets me big time. It really upsets me that we should have many more police officers speaking up because it's so obvious. All you got to do is look at the 9/11 Commission report and say, well, wait a minute, they left out an entire building. I mean, we don't work that way as police officers. When we're assigned to investigate a collision, a 3-car collision, if we don't have 3 cars in that collision report, our sergeant will jump down our throat. Not look at the evidence, to ship evidence over to China to destroy a crime investigation the way we did. I mean, it was completely destroyed. Police officers should look at that and say to themselves, that's the crime right there. That needs to be investigated. You can't sit up there and destroy a crime scene the way we did without investigating, without photographing, without analyzing evidence, without going to witnesses and getting full statements. Building 7 went down in a controlled demolition. How did terrorists from Afghanistan, from a cave in Afghanistan, get into this building that was a hornet nest of alphabet agency in that building? There's no way that building could have been compromised. Whoever was involved had to be at the highest levels of an organization, of our government,
Stretch. Big stretch. I'm sorry.
Mr. President. I know you said there'll be a time for politics, but you've also said you wanted to change the tone of Washington. Howard Dean recently seemed to muse aloud whether you had advanced knowledge of 9/11. Do you agree or disagree with the RNC that this kind of rhetoric borders on political hate speech?
Yeah. Look, there's time for politics. And, it's time for politics. And, it's an absurd insinuation.
You need to educate yourself. You need to look at the evidence. Revisit 9/11. It's going to be for our country. Turn off the television for half an hour a week and just get the information in your head about what happened on 9/11. And the fastest way to get there is just go to Building 7. Look at World Trade Center, Building number 7, the Solomon Brothers building. Watch it fall. And if you can tell me that that building fell because of office fires, I'll take you out to a steak dinner.
John, is there anything you want to add to that? Is there anything that we didn't sort of cover?
No. I can't even think
For a man who's not very loquacious, you did okay, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I got all these damn white folks staring at me. I better do something.
Yeah, absolutely.
If he has a weapon in his hand.
No, I haven't seen one yet. You guys got that guy crawling right now on the curb? Yeah, I got him. I put you around near him, and you guys are shooting over there too, so we'll see.
In March 1962, JFK was presented with a document known as the Northwoods Proposal, with chilling similarities to 9/11. Kennedy's Chief of Staff, General Lyman Lemnitzer, along with others, put forward a plan to bomb parts of Florida, even Washington, D.C., to hijack aircraft, blow up ships, and then blame it all on Cuba, using a compliant American media to break the shocking and totally deceitful news to an outraged public. Even the BBC acknowledged the existence of Northwoods, though, as we'll soon realize, good old Auntie Beebe has now become something of a whore for American politicians, especially when it comes to 9/11.
And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control.
President Kennedy refused to give his blessing to a bombing campaign upon his own people by his own people. As for proven terrorist Lyman Lemnitzer, he got appointed Supreme Allied Commander Europe for NATO. Here's a better shot of him, although he still managed to get buried in Arlington Cemetery, despite being a traitor.
Joined as a cadet in '66, became a regular officer in '68. In my 19th year, was posted to Brighton. So really one of the highlights of my career was working on the Regional Crime Squad. I did intelligence work with the 6th Regional Crime Squad, which now doesn't exist, in some other form. I also worked as a terrorist officer at Gatwick Airport in counter-terrorism and quite a few other things. I did a lot of surveillance work, taught surveillance, was in the training department, had quite a checkered career. I had great disquiet really about what went on, and when I saw the evidence of Building 7 and the collapse of that, I'd actually seen many controlled demolitions, actually police one or two. And, you know, when I saw that Building 7 pancake, I absolutely knew that that was a controlled demolition. There was just no doubt in my mind from the experience of seeing demolitions where, as a police officer, having to go there and actually throw a cordon around the building whilst it was pancaked down. So that really had me questioning. And then, of course, when I saw the BBC News programme, the 24-hour programme with Jane Stanley announcing that Building 7 had fallen, and seeing the disparity of the time, I think it was about a 20 minute in advance. Obviously, she had very strong psychic powers, or perhaps the script was read in advance, and that's certainly the version that I prefer to believe. So really my whole questioning of that incident started then, and I really started to dig into what was going on. The motivation behind 9/11, I think, is manyfold on quite a number of different levels. On one level, there is obviously the excuse, and it was obviously very much planned beforehand. I think when you read some of the documentation, PNAC, the project for the New American Century, that was written well prior to 9/11, is a very well resourced document now that's very available. You can actually see that 9/11 was a false flag event that was planned to bring about the ability to go into the Middle East and establish bases in the Middle East. Obviously, it was partly a resource-based situation, but really to establish a stronghold in an area where resistant pockets of strength were going to be attacked.
6, this is 2-6, we'll move, but we got this.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was
bypass.
God damn it, Kyle. All right. I hit my head. All right, you're clear. All right, I'm just trying to find targets again.
Master 6, this is Bushmaster 2-6.
Since 9/11, the machines have taken over. Your emails are read, your phone calls monitored. Almost our every move surveyed by our so-called security services. And in a world we are told is fraught with danger, we are supposed to trust our government's paranoia is actually all in our common interest. However, there is an alternative view. If Building 7 was demolished, as all the evidence suggests, given that the US government ignored it completely in the 9/11 Commission report, and given that they have already proven their willingness to attack their own civilians when deemed necessary, we should also consider that such surveillance is just as likely to serve as a very good way to monitor how many unbelievers in the government's official miracle there truly are. We all know that to demolish a building requires planning and foreknowledge, and wouldn't you be a little paranoid if the foreknowledge had been discovered?
On 9/11, we obviously have a few things which for historians are now bizarre. We need to investigate them in more detail. One thing, is the World Trade Center 7, which collapsed. That is well known. Another thing, maybe less well known, is the so-called put option issue. A put option, for those who are not active on financial markets, is a bet that a share will fall. Okay, you for instance buy shares of Lufthansa, an airplane, and you say, okay, I think this company is doing great, and all you hope for is that the shares are rising. That's the normal, investor thing. But people don't know that you can also bet on a share that is falling and make a profit from it, and for that you need a put option. Because actually your speculation is then that this share is going down, and if it really does, you get a lot of money. That's the framework. Now on 9/11, we can show that you have put options on American Airlines and United Airlines. And these are exactly the two companies which were involved because their planes were used for the terrorist attack. I have a colleague here in Switzerland. He's in Zurich at the University of Zurich, and his name is Professor Mark Chesney. And he has looked at the put option issue, and he can prove that there was insider trading on 9/11. So some people knew that this terrorist attack was going to happen. And What he looked at is when there was insider trading, in the sense of that many people thought the airlines were going to go down in many different countries, and they just bought put option on Singapore Airlines and Swiss Airlines and British Airways and American Airlines. Now that's not the case. It's just on United Airlines and American Airlines. So that's very specific foreknowledge that you need to actually pick the right airlines.
They said it was a reputable firm that had placed these airline put option trades. Tell us about this reputable firm, Alex Brown.
Yeah, it was Alex Brown, which is a subsidiary of Deutsche Bank. And they said that this is completely harmless. But what is really interesting here is that the executive director of the CIA at the time of the 9/11 attacks came directly from Alex Brown. And another interesting thing is that the CEO of Alex Brown, on the time of September 11th, on the next day he resigned from his post, even though he had still a contract for 3 years at Alex Brown. So this is a little bit strange, isn't it?
Well, it demonstrates a direct pipeline of information between the CIA, Alex Brown, where these put options are. And I believe after the events, something like $5 million of profits were never claimed, correct?
Yeah, there are different numbers out, but we can say something in between 2 million and 5 million, yes.
So, to sum it up, you had insider trading on 9/11. Somebody, knew that you can make $1 million or more, even on a day where people get killed, when it's all a tragedy. Some people get rich on that very day. And what we as historians would expect is that on such an issue, you would have a very thorough investigation by the Security and Exchange Commission, SEC. And that didn't happen. It just didn't happen. What we saw was that the Keane report, which is the investigation that the government of President Bush said could happen, that this investigation said, yes, there was insider trading, but we couldn't trace it back to Osama bin Laden. Okay, so to whom could you trace it back? That'd be the next question, but they just don't do it. So the put option issue is something that needs to be clarified if ever we want to understand the terrorist attacks of 9/11.
There are some people who understand there's a problem, but really don't want to do anything about it. Possibly it's fear, maybe they want to remain in their own kind of comfort zone. It's difficult. It's difficult to get people to engage with this subject when there's so much other things going on in the world, portrayed by the mainstream for that very purpose of distracting people away from serious issues. I joined the fire service in November 2000 and I'm currently employed by the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service in Edinburgh. I've been aware of the problems with the official story for 9/11 since approximately 2010. For a period of time I was in a state of shock that we had not been told the truth about that event. I was surprised that I hadn't seen Building 7 before. It's not something that's been publicised. There are not many people that know about it. If you want to know about Building 7, you more or less have to go on the internet and research it for yourself.
But we really couldn't see a lot of damage from this angle, from the north side of the structures. That's why everybody was so surprised when all of a sudden it just fell.
Now, the other thing, too, I presume it had been burning for some time. As you indicated, there was nobody inside, and we hope no danger to anybody when it went down.
Well, that's the thing, is that when number 2 went down, I don't think, and I know I with myself in that group, I never thought these things would fall down. I mean, we were watching them, you could see them burning, a lot of it was damaged, there was fire coming out of the top, but I just never for the life of me thought that these huge buildings that have been here so long would actually just fall, and that's what happened, they just crumbled.
Well, as reporters, you kind of run to the scene, and that's what happened with some of the firefighters and police, too. They ran to the
mainstream media, in my opinion, have toed the line as far as the establishment story is concerned, and they've painted people who are searching for the truth as a bit cuckoo. It's something we should be concerned about, especially for future generations. Men and women that have children and grandchildren, this is going to affect them unless we do something about it. If we don't do something about it, as I've already said, it will come back and there will be serious repercussions. If we are to believe the official story that these office fires caused that building to collapse, then we have a major problem worldwide with other buildings that have all been built in a similar nature.
You don't get explanations when you visit Ground Zero. Just bad memories of a day that launched the world into war on an invisible enemy that has the potential to run forever, with equally infinite profits for those who like that kind of thing. But the US authorities do stretch to a crayon and a piece of paper should you choose to etch the name of your loved one from the list of thousands. Matt's would-have-been sister-in-law had only been engaged to Jeff for weeks when he was murdered. Caroline has yet to bring herself to the memorial. She immediately joined the military after 9/11, as was no doubt the desired effect, but now has to live with the knowledge that the official explanation of her fiancé's death grows more and more untenable the more she studies it. Matt hopes the new World Trade Center 7 is a little more robust than its predecessor.
So at 5:20 in the afternoon, Building 7 drops like a rock, top to bottom in 7 seconds. This is clocked by physicists, and it's free fall acceleration. It's just as fast as dropping a bowling ball off the top of the building. For at least 2.5 seconds, the physicists say it came down at free fall. NIST originally denied this, saying, well, if it came down at free fall, that would mean there'd be no structure. The columns supporting the building, 40,000 tons of structural steel is designed to keep that building from going anywhere. So NIST is forced in a public conference by members of 8E 9/11 Truth, David Chandler in particular, to acknowledging that, oh, yeah, I guess it did come down by free fall. They admit that in their final report, but they do not acknowledge the implications of that, which are that all of those columns had to have been removed at once. All 80 columns on each of at least 8 floors, because that's the distance for which the period of free fall occurred, 2.25 seconds according to NIST. So this is rather incredible. You cannot have a building falling at free fall, which means not one of those columns gave any resistance without all of them being taken out by explosives. And of course, NIST's whole theory is that there was a fire on the 12th floor, which caused expansion of beams, which caused a pushing of a girder off of its seat on a column 79, which caused the 13th floor to fall on the 12th, 11th, etc., which caused the interior of the building to cave in. And then that instability traveled laterally. And then, and only then, the entire building drops in 7 seconds. Of course, if all that was going on inside the building, which never could have happened for at least a dozen reasons, you would have seen massive telegraphing and warpage on the exterior perimeter structure, which the videos do not reveal at all.
Did you know a third tower fell on 9/11? Today we're going to release to you results of a brand new poll that show that more and more Americans are rethinking what happened on 9/11, and increasingly More people are saying they do not believe the government's version of events. In 2008, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, released its long-awaited report on the collapse of World Trade Center 7. The lead investigator, Shyam Sunder, told journalists,
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires fueled by office furnishings. It did not collapse from explosives or from fuel oil fires.
We really have a new kind of progressive collapse that we have discovered here, which is a fire-induced progressive collapse.
As of today, 2,000 professional architects and engineers from around the world have come out to say that the NIST claim that Building 7 came down as a result of simple office fires is not only untrue, it's not possible. Tony Zambati, a mechanical design engineer with 27 years of experience in the aerospace and communications industries, and one of those 2,000 engineers calling for a new independent investigation into the collapse of Building 7 and the World Trade Center towers.
What a legitimate investigation would have done would have been to interrogate anybody who had access to those interiors. I'm not talking about office people, I'm talking about maintenance,
contractors,
security people, contractors, those type of people. That's never been done. That has never been done.
And I was going to ask you that too. Is that ultimately the goal here, is to get, I've heard, to get an independent investigation? The claim from NIST, the final report that they released in 2008, I believe it was,
right,
says that that building collapsed as a result of office fires.
Right.
And you all say that's not only not true, it's not possible. Why is that?
It is not possible. The initial walk off of the girder is impossible, and I've done a finite element analysis of that, and I can show you in detail that it's impossible. The column buckling, column 79, that buckling is impossible, and the complete free fall is impossible in a natural collapse.
And there is another issue of how NIST says Building 7 came down. They say it was normal office fires, but the technical explanation for that floor beams expanded because of heat and ultimately pushed a single column, column 79, off its seating. NIST says that caused the entire collapse of the building. What NIST went on to say in that report in 2008 was that the reason that column was able to be pushed off of its seating was because they said the column was unrestrained. And yet it was discovered last year in 2012, after a Freedom of Information Act request was granted, that NIST claim was not true. The columns were restrained. In fact, there were 3,896 shear studs holding those columns in place.
Matt has made the short journey from Ground Zero to meet two former emergency workers who were on duty on 9/11. Far from extreme, it's common sense and not a little patriotism that gives them the courage to speak out.
I achieved the American dream only to wake up to the American nightmare. It was a tough situation for us all. We lost 343 guys on that day. I retired with 32 years total. You know, they added up part of my military time and my police time. There's no way in the history of history that a steel frame building of that magnitude has ever come down from a few pockets of fire. I knew instinctively, I was suspicious. It just came down. And there's no question that that was a demolition job that anybody with an open mind and common sense cannot deny. The fire department mentality is such that it's patriotic, it's pro-government, it's pro-normalcy, and especially when we were doing the funerals. I did 7 and I couldn't do any more. when people have died, and they don't want to hear that. That's the last thing, and especially unpatriotic. That's not something you talk about. So no, I didn't even bring it up. But they're just not ready for it. If you're really patriotic and you really care about what happened to our brothers and what is happening to our country, start doing your own research. We have a web where you can start to research and cross-reference things, and there are materials that you can read, and there are sources you can go to, and you can put together your own incontrovertible facts that point you in the right direction. And don't rely on the media. The media is not there for you. It's there to manipulate you.
I am a retired Jersey City police officer who served 23 and a half years for the Jersey City Police Department. Jersey City is directly across the Hudson River from World Trade Center. There's no way, you don't need to be an expert to see that. That building was brought down on purpose, with purpose. And if they had said, oh, we're going to take it down on purpose and we're going to plant certain explosives to bring it down, it wouldn't happen in 3 hours. Or 6 hours. It would be 3 days or 4 days of preparation to make that happen. And I don't see that happening there. And that's just a legitimate question. Anybody with the brain could think that.
Are you aware, or do you have other fellow officers that are aware that the official story just doesn't sound true?
Yes, many police officers who think about it say, well, that doesn't make sense. Yes. But there was one in particular on my job, and basically they gave him a psych evaluation, which they see if he's able to carry a gun. Now that's your livelihood.
So after you started asking questions?
Yeah, well, he was putting things online, saying, well, what about this or what about that? And basically they will threaten your livelihood. And if you have children or you want to keep your job, or retire from a pretty good job. If you keep everybody busy, with the wrong reasons, they can't find the right reasons. And there was quite a lot of money being spread around, not to investigate, but almost to take their minds off investigations. We're going to have terrorist training. We're going to have new radio systems to communicate better. There was so much money being thrown around that the investigations were virtually stifled. And anybody who asked questions were, in my opinion, stifled.
I'm gravely concerned about the information provided us just yesterday that the President received a warning in August about the threat of hijackers by Osama bin Laden and his organization. We shouldn't jump to any conclusions.
It was earlier this year that Vice President Cheney called you and asked you not to hold wide-ranging hearings and to limit the investigation to the Intelligence Committee. Looking back, why do you think he made that call? Do you think that he knew that the White House did know something and that they were trying to keep the investigation limited because they didn't want to look culpable at all?
Well, I'm not going to come to any conclusions. It is true that the Vice President has requested on several occasions that we not have an investigation into this issue.
How many times did the Vice President ask you not to investigate this, and have others at the White House also asked that there be no investigation?
Oh, I'm not sure. There were numerous times. I can't recall exactly how many.
What were his reasons?
His reasons were that the intelligence community was so involved in the aftermath of 9/11 that they didn't want to take people off of what it was they were doing to do something like this.
He asked you once, just to make sure I'm clear on this, he asked you more than once.
Correct.
And was it more than twice?
Bob, it was 3.5 times. Yeah.
And it was no investigation whatsoever. He wasn't asking for it to keep it closed, to keep it to intelligence. He wanted no investigation.
That's correct.
What kind of government doesn't want an investigation into the biggest attack on its homeland since World War II?
Breaking news we're getting from the PA Newswire that there's been reports of an explosion outside Liverpool Street Station. That, of course, in the East End of London. It's the bordering area.
And what kind of treasonous little arsehole would try that in our country?
At the moment, we have a clear active threat. I want our police and our security services focused on dealing with that threat. If they end up being engaged in a public inquiry, the reality is, no matter what people might want or say they want at the outset, is that the resource and commitment and energy of those services will be diverted into that in circumstances where we know what has happened. Now, I totally understand, particularly when families are reading constant reports in the media about pieces of information that the security services had that they didn't act on.
John Hill, BBC Conspiracy Files. Can I ask you why you've made a film accusing innocent people of mass murder on 7/7 with no evidence at all? You have made a film which is damaging trust in the British government. Is that your intention, Mr. Hill?
Since we caught up with him, John Hill has been arrested. He is facing extradition to the UK on a charge of perverting the course of justice by sending DVDs of 7/7 Ripple Effect to the judge and jury foreman in a trial linked to 7/7.
The BBC decided not to make a programme about John Hill's court case. Having seen his film 7/7 Ripple Effect, a British jury found him not guilty of perverting the course of justice. And for a documentary that points out the gaping holes in the official narrative of the London bombings, that's quite an achievement for a movie allegedly containing no evidence at all. We suggest you watch 7/7 Ripple Effect. It's free on the internet, unlike the propaganda your license fee is funding. Meanwhile, on Channel 4.
Yes, what?
She was brought to the hospital just before 11 o'clock today. She was taken to theatre, and after about an hour undergoing surgery, she died at about midday.
A senior figure in the Reagan administration told me privately that the death of Yvonne Fletcher was the best thing that could have happened. What do you think he meant by that?
The political dimension was that it changed the attitude of the British government toward Gaddafi. And it affected many Europeans as well.
His report raises the most profound concerns about the intelligence services in Britain and America.
Oh, no!
Shot in the leg.
Oh, God!
It's an extraordinary suggestion that you are making. I want you to be quite clear. You do not believe Yvonne Fletcher was shot from that embassy building behind you.
For two reasons. The terminal velocity of 30 yards, which is the distance from me to the building, would be an extraordinary event for a submachine gun bullet. And secondly, the angle of 60 to 70 degrees of entry into the body would be totally inconsistent with an angle of 15 degrees or so coming from that building. There may well have been shots fired from number 5, but you can't say that the bullet that entered her body came from that angle. It's impossible to have that occur.
Lieutenant Colonel George Stiles, 26 years in the British Army, was one of its leading weapons experts.
I don't think a submachine gun killed the police lady.
Why not?
Because the bullet was going comparatively slowly, and I think from a submachine gun it would have gone that extra bit faster than the wounds that you've described.
Sterling is a submachine gun, and at 30 yards you'd expect the bullet to go almost straight through anybody standing in front of it.
From the description of the wounds, I think if it was a submachine gun, there would have been a little bit more penetration. The bullet wouldn't have tumbled about so much, it would have gone a bit straighter.
The end of the range of a submachine gun certainly isn't 30 yards.
On Dispatches this week and next, back on the trail of one of the most important investigations the programme has mounted. Dramatic new evidence on the killing of policewoman Yvonne Fletcher in London's St James's Square. Tonight, how the official version of the events behind her murder cannot be true. How she cannot have been shot from the Libyan embassy. But if not, then how? In a major two-part investigation, Dispatches reporter Joe Laban pieces together the full sinister truth behind her death. He will meet the man who knows just why she was killed, and the man who brought the gun into this country. And he will ask exactly who was in the know.
A senior figure in the Reagan administration told me privately that the death of Yvonne Fletcher was the best thing that could have happened. What do you think he meant by that?
Where do your loyalties lie? Because it's quite clear where theirs do.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th. Malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty.
Mr. Secretary, according to the Comptroller General of the United States, there are serious financial management problems at the Pentagon. Fiscal year 1999, 2.3 trillion missing.
Fiscal year 2000, 1.1 trillion missing. And DOD is the #1 reason why the government can't balance its checkbook. The Pentagon has claimed year after year that the reason it can't account for the money is because its computers don't communicate with each other.
Finally, Mr. Secretary, after the last hearing, I thought that my office was promised a written response to my question regarding the 4 war games on September 11th. I have not yet received that response, but would like for you to respond to the questions that I've put to you today, and then I do expect the written response to my previous question, hopefully by the end of the week.
Mr. Bush was very quick to make it clear about so-called conspiracy theories on 9/11. Alarmingly quick. Non-believers are a particular problem. They're very keen to have disappear, even to have outlawed. And making problems disappear is something they're rather good at in America. So too their media, especially when it comes to false flags and political obstacles.
Good evening. Dr. Martin Luther King, the apostle of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee. Police have issued an all-points bulletin for a well-dressed young white man seen running from the scene. Officers also reportedly chased and fired on a radio-equipped car containing 2 white men. Dr. King was standing on the balcony of his second-floor hotel room tonight when, according to a companion, a shot was fired from across the street. In the friend's words, the bullet exploded in his face. Police, who have been keeping a close watch over the Nobel Peace Prize winner because of Memphis' turbulent racial situation, were on the scene almost immediately. They rushed the 39-year-old Negro leader to a hospital where he died of a bullet wound in the neck.
In 1999, the widow of Dr. King wants to try the named conspirator Lloyd Jowers as a conspirator in the assassination of Dr. King. William Pepper is the King family attorney. And a jury found that the United States government, along with Lloyd Jowers, conspired to murder Dr. King. It's what we already knew, but that trial was not covered by the press. There was only one journalist in the room. And if you can imagine, only one journalist in the room for something so important as the trial to establish who conspired to kill Dr. King. But that also tells us the state of our media. It was at that trial that Dr. King was specifically targeted by name in the counterintelligence program. He was harassed, he was vilified, he was persecuted in every way imaginable. And all he wanted was the right to vote for black people. That's all. I mean, you know, now they figured out other ways to subvert the vote, but they should have known that they were going to be able to do that. So let them vote and stop the, you know, the turmoil that the country was going through. But no, and the church committee reports reveal that this behavior, the counterintelligence program behavior, was carried out for political purposes for certain individuals who had political objectives. What that means is that individuals who were insiders had access to the tentacles of government and could manipulate those tentacles for their own benefit. This is a very important finding of the church committee reports. December 1999, Judge Joe Brown came to one of my many COINTELPRO hearings that I had when I was in Congress. And I had one on the murder of Dr. King, and there I had Judge Brown studying the ballistics of that so-called murder weapon and found that it was not the weapon that actually killed Dr. King. Now, that's very interesting because that rifle is at the Lorraine Motel in Tennessee, purportedly the murder weapon, but it's not the murder weapon. Everything that you think you know about the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is a lie. One journalist in the room.
So Robbie, Cheney changes his story. Let me just briefly explain why. In this documentary on Showtime, he says that there was a shoot-down order, that he actually said he was going to shoot down the plane to save lives, which actually contradicts the 9/11 Commission report that says that there was no order made. Why do you think he changed his story here?
Well, because I think that he probably thought that people didn't remember that he had presidential emergency powers on that day. And I mean, the testimony shows that Cheney, you know, was at least criminally culpable for not issuing an evacuation order.
During the time that the airplane coming in to the Pentagon, there was a young man who would come in and say to the vice president, the plane is 50 miles out, the plane is 30 miles out. And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the vice president, do the orders still stand? And the vice president turned and whipped his neck around and said, of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary?
Plane's 10 miles out, 20 miles out, 30 miles out. Does the order still stand? Cheney's saying, of course they still stand. Obviously he's talking about a plane coming close. Why do you think there wasn't an evacuation order issued from the Pentagon?
On the off chance your place of work is ever targeted by a 150-foot-long Boeing jetliner one morning, and your boss knows that it's coming, you might feel a slight grievance and concern when he fails to evacuate the building, especially when nearly 200 of your colleagues are killed. April Gallup and her baby boy suffered serious injury at her Pentagon office when it was struck just yards from her desk. Foolishly, she believed she had a right to question this and other failures in a court of law and to get a fair hearing. But like most questions that surround 9/11, not only do they get fudged, nor make the front pages, they get very special treatment from a judge.
The least thing we can rationally say is, you were on duty that day. This was your job. This happened on your watch. We don't know, based off evidence, whether you were intentional, deliberate, or you were indirectly involved just on the basis of this was your duty. For example, like a CEO. No, you're not responsible for the person the accountant who might run off with all the money, but you're the CEO. You should know the people that you hire. You should know, the type of people that you hire. So we thought that that was a fair, rational premises to bring to court because you failed. I first realized about it through my attorney. He was going over the likelihood of, we would have a higher likelihood of being challenged than we would of it going through proper, I wouldn't say proper, but going through in a more smooth manner, like it's due process, that he felt like we would have more challenges. So I was wondering, okay, I expect that. What would that be? And that's when he let me know about Mr. Bush, relative, being one of the judges. So I didn't know how close he was. I just was told that he was a cousin. I don't know if he was first, second, third. I didn't know his numerical, but the issue was, even me, not knowing, the legal world, that I just felt like that's conflict of interest. My first thing was, okay, I'm sure you know legally what you could do to try to handle that or to deal with that, whether it's file a complaint, which I wouldn't know what he would do, but said whatever you need to do, try to work through that because, wow, that is going to be a problem. Well, he got sanctioned and they considered the case as frivolous and it was thrown out. And so that was a big disappointment because we never really got to really present the bulk of the information and the evidence. And so with the frivolous claim, that meant, and not on top of that, we're going to sanction this fine. We're going to give you a fine and make sure you don't do this again.
Judge John Walker leads a charmed life. Not only can he get appointed to preside over highly sensitive court cases concerning his own family, he can run down and kill a traffic cop with apparent immunity from police procedure.
It's 4 o'clock. I'm Rupert Bartier. The Chief Inspector of Schools has published what he describes as a sometimes shocking report into claims of extremist plots to take control of schools in Birmingham.
The Chief Inspector of Schools in England delivers a damning verdict on the way some schools are run in Birmingham.
The Education Secretary says new rules will be drawn up after 5 Birmingham schools were put into special measures over claims of Muslim extremism.
The damning verdicts on the Birmingham schools at the centre of an alleged Muslim plot. 5 schools in Birmingham are being placed under special measures following claims they're under the influence of Islamic extremists. An Ofsted report into the so-called Trojan horse plot claims schools, including Parkview, Golden Hillock and Nansen, were being run under a culture of fear and intimidation. Head teachers have been forced out of their jobs and pupils exposed to radicalised views.
The chairman of the Education Trust at the centre of the alleged Trojan horse Muslim takeover plot in Birmingham schools has resigned along with his fellow trustees. The trust was the focus of allegations made in the anonymous Trojan horse letter, which is now widely believed to be a hoax.
If you've never wondered why all the same stories are on all the same channels, maybe it's time you did. Because despite all these media organizations being supposedly independent, they're obviously not. Either that or it's one hell of a coincidence. And isn't it clear what kind of message they want us to get? One British man decided he didn't believe it anymore. So he went to court to obey the law.
Most of us think we know the story of 9/11, that planes hit the Twin Towers and that they collapsed, taking World Trade Center 7, a nearby skyscraper, with them. But a group of people known as truthers think that's not the whole story. Now, their evidence isn't often heard, but on Monday, February 25th, a court case in Horsham, a small town in West Sussex, was set to give a voice to people who believe that we haven't heard the true story of 9/11.
One such man is Tony Rooke, and on February 25th he had a rare opportunity to showcase his evidence in a tiny regional magistrates court in the town of Horsham in Sussex. Tony was on trial for failing to pay his TV licence, which is used to fund the BBC. Tony claimed that to pay the fee meant funding terrorism, because the BBC is implicit in a cover-up which had sparked the so-called War on Terror.
I'd written to the BBC in 2005-2006 and asked them if they could give me the original source for the story about World Trade Center 7 having gone down, which they reported numerous times before it occurred. They asked me to file a Freedom of Information Act request, which I did, and that came back saying that they couldn't tell me, so that was a lot of use. And to this day, the BBC have never revealed or not bothered to investigate the original source for the story of World Trade Center 7 going down. They've turned around since and said, oh, it was Reuters, news agency, that gave us the information. But that's like saying, where does sugar come from? It comes from Tesco's. Well, no, it doesn't come from Tesco's. It comes from sugar beets. It's not the original source. And so I felt until they could give me that information, I wasn't going to pay them. What happened was, when we went to court, I had to assemble this team of people to cover the various aspects of the BBC's coverage of 9/11. And when you look at it, to say it's deceitful would be polite.
Among the witnesses due to be called was Tony Farrell, a former senior intelligence analyst from South Yorkshire Police, who claims he was fired for publicising his views on 9/11.
I went to my organisation with a plea saying all the evidence stacks one way and it points towards internal tyranny. Can you show me proofs that the threats from Islamic terrorism? Because without the proofs, I'm not prepared to lie for you. Now, they didn't say I was wrong, Tony. They didn't offer any proofs. They simply said, Tony, we are just the government foot soldiers. You and I will never get them ever to tell the truth. But if you don't go along with it, basically, we'll have no option but to withdraw your privilege from the organisation, and actually your views are incompatible with being a principal intelligence analyst. They offered me resignation, they offered me to retire, they took me to the occupational health, but I said, no, you're going to have to sack me for this.
The police force didn't comment on the exact circumstances of his dismissal, but confirmed that Mr. Farrell's position had become untenable.
But the biggest, the most damning piece of evidence against the BBC and their deliberate cover-up is how they've dealt with the free fall of Building 7. So the BBC are absolutely aware of what the implications are of free fall, because back in 2007 they ran a documentary called The Truth Behind the Third Tower, looking specifically at the free fall of Building 7, and they did their own analysis to attempt to show that free fall didn't occur. So they know full well what the implications are of freefall. The problem was that 1 year later, NIST, the official investigators, were forced to finally admit that freefall had actually occurred in Building 7. Now, that should have been absolutely bombshell news across the world. The BBC should have been on the front page of the paper. NIST had confirmed freefall of Building 7, which is proof of controlled demolition, which is proof of an inside job. Massive story. The BBC are legally required then, legally and morally required, to correct the error that they made in their own documentary 1 year earlier, denying that freefall happened. Did they correct that error? Still to this day, the BBC have refused to correct that error on an issue of absolute massive importance.
The implications of Building 7 coming down in freefall are huge for every fire service in the world. The reason for that is because when you fight a high-rise building fire, what you do is you go to the floor below the fire, you establish a bridgehead, you then send breathing apparatus teams up the stairs onto the next floor where the fire actually is, together with water jets, to go and find the fire, locate it, attack it, and put it out. You do not at any time think that the building you're actually stood in is suddenly going to collapse down into a pile of rubble in 6 seconds the way that Building 7 did. So it changes completely how you're going to fight high-rise fires. It's the only steel-framed building in history, high-rise building in history, that's ever collapsed from fire alone. All of the others have stayed up. Where there's been fires, there's been partial collapses, there's been little bits fall off, but the entire building has never gone from 47 stories to 3 stories of rubble in a few seconds. So every procedure for fighting high-rise buildings is going to have to change. So for firefighters, everything's going to change. For building engineers and architects, it's also going to have to change, because the unspoken acceptance before that the building frame would always stay up because the fire can't get hot enough to take out a steel frame, well, clearly, according to NIST now, this can happen. So that means that you have to either beef up the fire protection, which has got to be retrofitted on every high-rise building on the planet, or you have to use new materials that can resist office fires better than steel. So, and when you think about that, if the office fire is going up to 1,000 degrees centigrade and the steel is only affected at 1,600 degrees centigrade, well, how much higher than 1,600 do you have to go?
There's one particular piece on the internet called the Editor's Part of the Conspiracy, where they go on to describe their reports of Building 7 as shrouded in uncertainty, that they didn't make any assertion it had definitely gone down. Well, that's a complete lie. I mean, are you watching a different report?
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago, I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing, and indeed it has. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse? Presumably there were very few people in the Salomon building when it collapsed.
And most people who watch the BBC still trust them. 3 million people, I think, watched Conspiracy Road Trip. And in that, one prime example of this would be the questions surrounding the flights. Now, they interview a guy called Robert Haddow. Now, Robert Haddow is a light aircraft pilot, and he takes up one of these young conspiracy theorists that the BBC have roped into doing this programme to try and convince them of the error of their ways. Now, what happens is, takes the girl up in the aircraft, fly around for a bit. It's a light aircraft. Look how easy it is to pilot a plane.
So how easy do you think it would be for an amateur pilot to fly a big, massive airliner jet?
Well, in fact, it's easier to fly a big jet.
I mean, do you know much about Boeings?
As a matter of fact, yes.
Okay, the exact Boeing that went into the World Trade Centers?
All they had to do was fly straight and level towards a target.
I don't know why they interviewed Mr. Haddow and portrayed him, or have him portray himself as some kind of expert on commercial jetliners. He's never flown a jetliner, as he said in his email. And he turned around to me and said that the flight envelope, the manageability of the aircraft, capabilities of the aircraft, make flying a commercial jetliner considerably harder than flying a light aircraft. So the complete antithesis of what he says in the programme. Now, the interesting thing is, what the BBC could have done, and any researcher will be able to find this interview in a minute.
I flew the 2 actual aircraft which were involved in 9/11, the flight number 175 and flight 93, the 757 that allegedly went down at Shanksville, and flight 175 is the aircraft that's alleged to have hit the South Tower. I don't believe it's possible for, like I said, for a terrorist, a so-called terrorist, to train on a 172 and then jump in the cockpit of a 757, 767 glass cockpit and vertical navigate the aircraft, lateral navigate the aircraft, and fly the airplane at speeds exceeding its design limit speed by well over 100 knots. I couldn't do it, and I'm absolutely positive they couldn't do it.
Ian Henshall's the top expert on the paper trail in the country, and he lives not far away from me on the south coast, so I dragged Ian in to give his expertise on the paper trail, which is as frightening as Building 7.
The only investigations were the investigations for evidence to fit the pre-decided official story. Before the FBI even started work on this case, they had been told what the story was very, very clearly by the US media in total unison, by politicians all over the world, by the UN Security Council within 24 hours. This was an Al-Qaeda terrorist hit. There was nothing the American government could have done about it. They were completely taken by surprise. Any suggestion about any other possibility is an outrageous slur on the American government and the American people. That's what the FBI brief said before they started that investigation. But at the moment, things look pretty bad. The CIA have got a lot of explaining to do, and the longer they go on in denial, and that is their current position, they flat out deny Richard Clarke's allegation that they must have consciously allowed the 9/11 hijackers a safe passage. Consciously allowed, that's a lot to answer to, and the evidence supports Richard Clarke, no doubt about it. The evidence from the paper trail, the investigations, the Inspector General's reports, it all points to the CIA making a conscious decision to safeguard the hijackers from arrest by the FBI. They argue that these were stray bits of information which never got collated properly. So there's been a lot of debate about that. But in recent years, the scales have tipped right over to the most suspicious possibilities, because it's become clear that this was not lost information accidentally. This was information which was blocked. There were people in senior positions in Washington and New York who were actively obstructing FBI officers who would have arrested some, if not all, of the 9/11 hijackers had they not been obstructed. So when you come to look at the actual detailed characters of the culprits, the alleged culprits, you find some very bizarre stories. You find hard-drinking guys, cocaine-using guys, lap-dancing enthusiasts, getting up one morning and all committing suicide, allegedly because they are, devout Muslims, or they believe they're going to go to heaven or something along those lines. We don't really know. Nobody's bothered to explain it to us in any detail. But certainly there's a lot of contradictory character issues, to say the least. Chichester Police came to us and said that, first of all, the British government was overseeing the investigations and would have ensured there wasn't any foul play. Well, given what we know about Tony Blair's relationship with George Bush and how the British police actually do not have jurisdiction in the United States, that's absurd. That's just indefensibly stupid to say that, to be honest. Secondly, they said that nobody could have kept it secret. Well, it hasn't been kept secret. Whistleblowers have come forward. They've been ignored, but they're there on record. The evidence has come out in official inquiries. We now know that the CIA were colluding, for whatever reason, with the alleged 9/11 hijackers. That's proven.
There's always a big animal standing over there, and it's shitting all over the place, but we don't talk about it. Now, what happens to society when we all share a secret, but we cannot talk about it? Fact is that the post-9/11 society is characterized by lies.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere.
And fear. This time, they fucked up. When you are seeing Building 7, it's obvious. It is so open for everyone, ready to see what they see, that this time, they went too far. We're talking about the laws, fundamental laws of physics. We're talking about Sir Isaac Newton's laws of motion. And according to these, this is impossible unless you have applied some force to make the building fall. Gravity cannot do that, because when a building is in free fall, all the energy of the building is going into accelerating the building down. There is no energy left for breaking thousands of steel beams and girders. This is completely basic physics. There is no way Building 7 could be brought down without application of explosives, unless you are ready to violate Sir Isaac Newton's laws of motion. And this hasn't happened since 1687 yet. So if you claim the official story, you're talking about miracles, because a miracle is a violation of the laws of nature, and I don't believe that.
In 1928, the world signed the Treaty for the Renunciation of War, probably the most important law ever passed by the nations of the world, and nobody in this country seems to have heard of it. Now, it was very important because after the Second World War, Germany's leaders were prosecuted at Nuremberg and convicted of 11 breaches of the Kellogg-Briand Pact, which is the Treaty for the Renunciation of War. And that became universal law. Now, when George Bush and Tony Blair walked into Afghanistan and to Iraq, they did exactly the same as Germany's leaders did in the Second World War when they walked into Poland and Belgium and Holland and all the other European nations. Now, it's very important for ordinary soldiers to realize that the judgment at Nuremberg applies to every human being. And one of the key arguments that Germany's leaders made was that they were only following orders. Now, the judges said, no, that's not good enough. If your government breaks the laws of war, you must refuse to obey their orders. And it is that law, which was introduced in 1950, which every one of Britain's armed forces has been breaking ever since. So both the police and the armed forces have a duty in law to refuse to obey the orders to fight in Afghanistan or to support the war in Syria or to attack Libya or to take part in the attacks on Iraq. All of those were illegal. And what very few members of the armed forces or the police know is that it is a criminal offence to follow an unlawful order. And that's what they have been doing for the last 12 years.
It wasn't only people who died on 9/11. It was trust. Trust that the laws these men fought for would be cherished and preserved. Faith that our leaders and press would never con a new generation of soldiers into breaking those laws. And they have. And this time for a series of abject and calculated lies. We've no justification in puffing out our chests with pride every time one of those glorious aircraft take to the sky, when we've permitted all they stand for to be shot down by liars, frauds, and war profiteers. If you wear a poppy next Remembrance Day, wear it having made at least some gesture of defiance against the despicable and mendacious bastards who've led this country into phony war after phony war.
The United States knows that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. The UK knows.
Which could be activated within 45 minutes, including against his own.
Any country on the face of the earth with an active intelligence program knows that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction.
And if he does not disarm, the United States of America will lead a coalition and disarm him in the name of peace.
By 2020, Britain will have spent at least £40 billion on its Afghan campaign alone, enough to recruit over 5,000 police officers or nurses and pay them throughout their entire careers. Don't you think he would have preferred that to this? One dreads to think what any Spitfire pilot would make of the country he fought for, and what it now does in the name of peace. Over 1.5 million people can march in protest on the streets of London, but still we are taken to war. Some democracy. We can poison babies for millennia to come with weaponry containing depleted uranium, and still the corporate media conveniently swerves the issue. How stupid can this country get? How wicked. Oh, and this little oik, claiming for expenses to attend a war memorial. Lying about the effects of depleted uranium on our troops and helpless Iraqi children. We asked numerous church leaders to take part in this film. They all declined. A shame. We thought they liked miracles. Talking of church leaders, there's nothing quite as curious as a gun-happy British establishment laying wreaths on Poppy Day. This man's double standards are nothing short of gut-churning.
The Prime Minister himself has become salesman-in-chief for Britain's arms industry, pushing for deals not only in Gulf states such as Oman, but even in countries where alleged human rights abuses make them highly controversial, such as here in Saudi Arabia. Now MPs have fired a warning shot across the government's bows, questioning the checks made on more than 3,000 export licences, worth more than £12 billion, to 27 countries, which are on the Foreign Office's own list of human rights concerns.
Just how grubby can they get? In 5 years' time, Britain's excursions into the Middle East will have cost each British household over £2,000. Wouldn't you rather have that money? As opposed to killing children?
Well, the first thing I'd say to somebody who was endeavoring to join the military, you know, hell, my kids might make that choice someday. I have to be willing to accept that possibility. And I'd probably say the same thing to them that I would to a young man today, and that would be, I understand where your desire is to help your country and to protect against what you see as a threat to your way of life. But unfortunately, the truth is far from what you're being told. And unless you're willing to look a little deeper and see what's really at play here, specifically the agenda of never-ending war, always propping up a straw man, a boogeyman, to justify never-ending policies of war, if you're not able to see that, if you're not quite able to grasp that concept, then really there's not much I can say to you. You're going to want to join and fight the good fight and so on and so forth. I understand that. You know, I'm that person. I've been there. And I'm not saying I'm better than you, smarter than you, or anything like that. However, if anyone takes an honest look at 9/11 and specifically Building 7, they will realize they're being lied to. And the entire system is set up to continue lying to them. That tells you a lot about not only how much our government feels about us, but also about what our government's real agenda is and what they're really endorsing, which is a never-ending state of war. These people are psychopaths. They don't have compassion and empathy like a healthy human being does. They don't care about you or me. They don't care about the military. They call us heroes to their media and whatnot. They don't give a shit about us at all. And they certainly don't give a shit about the Iraqi people or the Iranian people or any people for that matter. So if you want to understand the way the world functions, you need to look at it from the perspective of a psychopath who is drunk on his own power. Now, if you can get into that place and start to look at the way the world functions, you're going to find that it all makes perfect sense. Keep in mind, these people also have spent their trillions and trillions of dollars and pounds on building things such as underground compounds, which I don't know if you've got an invitation, but I don't. And these people are so nuts that they are willing, in my opinion, to set off a third world war. Look at the policies with regards to antagonizing Russia. What the hell are we doing? We're picking a fight with a nation. Is Russia seriously a threat to Europe or the West? That's just ridiculous. Of course they're not. Why would you do such a thing? Would a sane, healthy human being carry out a policy like that? No. No. But if you're a psychopath who sees that the only way that you can maintain your position of power is to divide people, then you see war as a good thing. For you, war is great. So everything you can do to get people to fight a war against each other and keep fighting each other is good for you. Now, if you're sane, that doesn't make sense. So you need to get out of your sane perspective, get into the mind of a psychopath, drunk on his own power, and see the world that way, and all of these things will make perfect sense. So in the case of ISIS, our best friends and allies in Saudi Arabia, they are the funders of ISIS, as are Qatar, another friend of ours. If you're not willing to accept that our good friends and allies, the ones that we're doing big military defense contracts with, the United States just did a $60 billion contract with Saudi Arabia, which is now pummeling the poorest nation in the Middle East, Yemen. Unless you're willing to accept the fact that our best friends and allies, political allies, are actually the funders of ISIS, and that our governments, they're providing political cover to Saudi Arabia and Qatar and these other nations, the bottom line is you need to look deeper. Because if you're willing to put yourself in a position to kill or be killed, you should make damn sure that it's worth it, really. Because there's 22 American service members a day, and who knows how many English service members a day who are committing suicide every day. And I tell you, the reason why they're doing that is because they realize deep down that whatever lies they've been told don't square with the truth. And they have gone into someone else's land and killed people, including women and children, and they're suffering so badly from that that the best exit for them is to commit suicide. If you have a fighting spirit, if you're a warrior and you want to if you want to fight, then fight the right cause, fight the just cause, fight a cause that will serve all humanity, not some bogus agenda manipulated by the powers that be to get you to go fight wars for a bunch of chicken hawk cowards who will never go off and do the killing that they're ordering you to commit, and they certainly won't have their children going there anyway. They're a bunch of cowards. I don't know why you'd give your life for these cowards.
Hey, we need to stop that so we can get down there. We need to stop. You see my local...
Stop break. Crazy Force 1, request permission to engage. Picking up the wounded. Yeah, we're trying to get permission to engage. Come on, let us shoot. Push master, Crazy Force 1-8.
I came home late one night after a week out of town working, and my son and his mother came in and told me that Noah had shot himself. And actually that was the first night I had slept in like 3 months.
I know it sounds horrible, but it was just simply, that's the way it is. I knew it was coming, and you were waiting. But what really worried me was his anger toward all of us for letting it happen. He was well armed. He had a .38. He had a rifle from his grandfather that served in World War II. And I was worried about him retaliating against us. And even his mother admitted that he did us a favor because of what could have probably happened. The streets were vacant. There was really no resistance. They just showed up, started cleaning up the mess. The sewer plants were bombed. The water plants were bombed. Just this precision bombing just didn't work. These little kids were really disturbing. They came out after 3 days. They were in shock, and they were starving. And he said for another couple of days, they would just watch them from the background. And eventually they realized they weren't going to be fired upon, and they just all of a sudden went off and started feeding on these little tadpoles that were in the ditches there. And our soldiers couldn't feed them. They couldn't do any help at all. And so these kids started throwing rocks. And they pelted our soldiers for day after day, and then the orders finally came through to shoot these kids so they could get the bodies cleaned up. He didn't engage in it, but others did. And they were so frustrated. Here they were just, 6 months before they were at Ronald McDonald land. And now they're in a war zone. War crimes are being committed on a massive scale. And after some of these soldiers killed these kids, my son said that's when the suicide started. And I really don't want to say it in public, but I really think that these 22 a day that are committing suicide should go into city council and inform them that my life is fucked. And one of these days I'm going to shoot myself in your park and you'll have to clean up my corpse. I mean, I know it sounds cold and cruel, but, I would rather have my son do that than just go out in the woods and do it peacefully. Taking your own life is the way you want to do it. But if I would show up right at the city council and have my corpse hauled out of there. I mean, like I said, these were the adults that sent kids in the war. I tried to tell them just to bail. Just do not do it. You're better off to do jail time than what you're about to go through. Even I didn't know how cruel these people could be. The training they give these kids is almost guaranteed a suicide. In the Civil War and World War II particularly, they discovered that only 15% of soldiers were actually engaging in pulling the trigger. And so they needed to change that. And they developed these video games. And they're very effective on desensitizing you. So what is happening now, these kids have got up to it. I guess it's a 98% kill rate, but they can't turn it off. They set up these road checkpoints, and they were very, very confusing. And basically, they had brainwashed our soldiers into seeking revenge on the Iraqis for September 11th. They were a whipping boy. And apparently, the doctor got a call. His family had been bombed. And he was coming up through a checkpoint, was frustrated, looked different, and the order just came down for my son to shoot the guy. And shot him, got him through the neck. But until you educate the population, it'll just never change. These people do what they do. They create war to create their profits. And we wholeheartedly join the military, we pay our taxes, and we follow unconditionally without asking any critical questions. They call you a conspiracy theorist, and instead of talking about the technical, they want to know the who, the whys, and the whats. In other words, they want to engage in conspiracy theory. World Trade Center 7, I have no idea how they could do something like that, but it's obvious through the evidence we have that it was brought down in controlled demolition. So that is a job for policemen and investigators. That's their job, and they are failing at this point to accomplish that.
as long as there are black police officers guarding the very same organization that killed their greatest leader. Whilst this young and beautiful country is blinded by its own flag. And if the majority of American cops are content to twiddle their thumbs over 9/11, nothing changes. America seems to have skipped the history lesson that empires never last. The Romans, like the Germans, both know the cost of trying to own the world, as do we British. Some failures are inevitable. Others are simply impossible. Former Judge Ferdinando Imposimato has investigated more serious crimes than David Cameron has done dodgy arms deals. From the attempted assassination of Pope John Paul II, the kidnapping and murder of Italian President Aldo Moro, the false flag bombings of Operation Gladio, Imposimato proved such a threat to the mafia. In 1983 they killed his brother Franco as a warning. But unlike some, he is no coward.
Understand that it is impossible that this collapse of World Trade Center 7 happened because of the fires. This collapse happened because of the preparation. Who made this preparation? This is a case that I have studied and I have investigated very well for 14 years. The collapse happened in 6 seconds. So this is possible only if you have prepared the collapse with the bomb.
One of the guys, he can tell you I'm okay, all right? Here, hold on. You want to call your mother or something?
You heard explosions, like boom.
We just heard one more explosion. That's about the 4th one we've heard.
Craig Bartmer was a policeman who was near Building 7 as it started to come down.
It was nothing I would ever imagine seeing in my life. You know, the thing started peeling in on itself, and I mean, there was an umbrella of crap 7 feet over my head that I just stared at. And somebody grabbed my shoulder and I started running, and the shit's hitting the ground behind me. And the whole time you're hearing boom, 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 boom. So I think I know an explosion when I hear it.
A few blocks up West Broadway, looking toward the World Trade Center in the distance, Ashley Banfield was conducting an interview for MSNBC.
You were just told by police that you should move out of your...
The mic was set to pick up speech a few inches away. From the involuntary startle response,
oh my God,
we know explosions are being heard. However, listening closely, we discover that the microphone did indeed pick up the sounds of explosions, but very faintly. Turn up the volume. Listen for a low rumble in the background.
you were just told by police that you should move out of your apartment, Fabiana. Yes. You've got Carolina here?
Yes. They advised us to leave because we have...
Oh my God.
If you didn't hear the blasts, back up, use earphones, turn up the volume, and listen again. There were 2 blasts, followed by 7 more, regularly spaced, all in 2.5 seconds. Craig Bartmer's testimony may come to mind.
The whole time you're hearing boom, 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 boom. I think I know an explosion when I hear it.
When we hear the sharp, regular series of sounds in the background, the building has not yet started to fall. When we hear the reporters say, "This is it,"
this is it,
the building has not yet started to fall. The fall of the building corresponds to the crescendo in the crowd response. Here is another street scene with the building in full view. The crowd responds almost immediately as the building starts to fall. This occurs just after the reporter says, "This is it."
This is it. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Therefore, the blasts we heard occurred seconds before the building started to fall. When Ashley Banfield says, "This is it," it is because she has been previously told to expect Building 7 to come down.
The brown building, the tall one, is number 7 World Trade Center. I've heard several reports from several different officers now that that is the building that is going to go down next.
Back in the studio, the anchor, Brian Williams, not only had foreknowledge of the collapse, he had a ready explanation.
What we've been fearing all afternoon has apparently happened. We were watching number 7 World Trade, which was part of the ancillary damage of the explosion and collapse of the other two.
Just as Ashley Banfield was told, Brian Williams was told. There is indeed evidence that even the top fire officials were told.
We are on the phone with New York Fire Department Lieutenant David Restuccio. Lieutenant, where are you right now?
I'm at the corner of Northmore Street and Greenwich Street.
Can you confirm it was number 7 that just went in?
Yes, sir.
And you guys knew this was coming all day?
We had heard reports that the building was unstable and that it eventually would either come down on its own or it would be taken down.
They are policemen. They are members of security. I have to tell you that we need the truth, because without truth it is impossible to improve. This problem we have now, we have had for many years, but it is not finished. You have to know that a lot of soldiers, a lot of policemen, a lot of members of security have been killed. This problem has not been solved.
And visit a chief inspector in West Sussex, and you present her with stuff that clearly is not aligned with the official narrative, they still choose to do nothing. And I've encountered that at all levels of the British authorities, you know, whether it be the police, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, say it's essentially outside their jurisdiction and they rely on the official narrative of the US. You can't see something, be confronted with such evidence that is in direct conflict with the official story and just choose to do nothing, you know, unless you're going massively into denial, cognitive dissonance, whatever you want to call it. I mean, whoever you are, whether you're in the police or not, you know, you've got to look within yourself and is that what you should be doing? Is it right? The police force, they're regular people. And yep, there's going to be some fear that they may lose their jobs. But this is going on everywhere. People are waking up to corruption and just things that are blatantly not right. And if we just choose to be silent on that, it's not going to end well for any of us. I can't believe that all of the police are corrupt. I can't believe that. I just can't.
Ask yourself again why you've never seen this information before. Why has the TV and press tried to smother it? And on the rare occasions they do pay it attention, why do they lie and blur the facts? The 9/11 cover-up should be everywhere in our media. You now have incontrovertible forensic evidence that has the potential to change everything for the better. But only if you elect to stop protecting those that have demonstrated they care nothing for you or for the public you're meant to serve. Since when were British coppers content to leave their colleagues' murders uninvestigated, or the deaths of 67 UK citizens surrounded by question marks?
Now!
Whatever you decide, please don't hope this problem is going to go away without you doing something. Like we said, you can choose to believe in miracles, or you can be heroes or cowards. It's no use looking big and tough if you haven't got a clue what's going on. Please do us all a favor. Do your job.
We won't shoot anymore.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull. And then we watched the building collapse.
Your official response was that it was the firefighters. My question is, it was pretty clear that you meant the building, and if it was the firefighters, they already are outside the building by 12 because the water lines were broken. That's the question. And the fire chief that you said you spoke to, Fire Chief Negro, denies talking to you on that day of 9/11. Can you answer those questions and address the theories against you?
The leaseholder of the World Trade Center complex, Larry Silverstein, gave a public interview on PBS in 2002, and he said that they pulled that building, which is a demolition term for intentionally bringing down a building. This man made over $5 billion from those buildings' destruction, and I want to know if there was ever a formal investigation into Larry Silverstein, the leaseholder of the World Trade Center complex, and his ties to this entire event.
I don't believe there's been a formal investigation. I haven't heard that. I don't know that. I do know that that wall, I remember, was in danger, and I think that they made a decision based on the danger that it had of destroying other things, that they did it in a controlled fashion.